Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with the next video. It's number 19 in the countdown towards the resumption of the 2020-2021 Candidates Tournament. From the 19th of April these 8 players will do battle and play the second half of the event, which was cut short in March 2020 because of the corona pandemic. The 8 players from the top left clockwise: Caruana, Ding, Grishuk, Nepomniachtchi, Alexienko, Wang Hao, Giri and Vachier-Lagrave. And the standings halfway are that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Jan Nepomniachtchi are leading the candidates with 4.5 points out of 7 games. 4 players a full point behind: Caruana, Giri, Wang Hao and Grishuk. Grishuk has played 7 draws so far. Ding and Alexienko need a miracle to win the candidates tournament and be Magnus Carlsen's next challenger. This candidates tournament is the 29th in the history of chess, and on Chess to Impress we're counting down towards the resumption of this great event by looking at the 28 earlier candidates tournaments or candidates matches in the history of the World Championship. It all started in London 1883 when Zuckerstort and Steinitz finished in the first 2 places. They played the first official World Championship match 3 years later. Wilhelm Steinitz gained the right for a rematch against world champion Emanuel Lasker in St. Petersburg 1895-1896, and Paul Keres from Estonia won the tournament in Netherlands 1938 to gain the right to challenge world champion Aljechin for the world title. He never got a match because of World War II interfering. Bronstein won Budapest and Moscow 1950 to gain the right to challenge world champion Botvinnik for the world title. Vasily Smyslov won 2 candidate cycles, Zurich 1953 and Amsterdam 1956. And Misha Tal won in Yugoslavia 1959. It was his turn to challenge Botvinnik for the world title. Tigran Petrosyan became world champion in 1963 after having won the candidates tournament in 1962. Boris Spassky also won 2 cycles, Tbilisi 1965 and Kiev 1968. Bobby Fischer beat Tigran Petrosyan in Buenos Aires 1971 to qualify for the match of the century against Spassky 1 year later. Anatoly Karpov beat Viktor Korchnoi in Moscow 1974 to gain the right to challenge Fischer. Fischer didn't play and Karpov became the 12th world champion by default. Viktor Korchnoi won the next 2 cycles and lost twice to Karpov in the World Championship match. Kasparov won Vilnius 1984, challenged Karpov and became the 13th world champion in 1985. Karpov came back, winning the next 2 cycles, played Kasparov again. Those 2 giants played a total of 5 World Championship matches against each other. Nigel Short broke the Kasparov-Karpov era in 1993. He beat Karpov in the semi-finals and Timman in the final, and it was his turn to play Kasparov. Anand won the next cycle. It is there in red because we're going to look at a game from that cycle in this video. Shirov beat Kramnik in Cazorla 1998 and should have got a match against Kasparov. That never happened. Kramnik did get a match and became the 14th world champion in the year 2000. Dortmund 2002 was won by Peter Leko and he almost beat Kramnik in their world championship match 2 years later. Aranyan, Gelfand, Grishuk and Leko qualified for the World Championship tournament, which was won by Anand later that year. Anand's next 3 challengers were Topalov, Gelfand and Carlsen. Carlsen became the 16th world champion. Anand came back, won the next candidate cycle for a rematch against Carlsen, and Karyakin and Caruana were Carlsen's last 2 challengers. They both only lost in the tiebreak. So who will it be? Yekaterinburg 2020-2021. It will be very exciting and it's going to start again, as said, on the 19th of April. As mentioned in this video, we're going to have a look at the candidate cycle 1994-1995, which was in the end won by Anand. We had a FIDE versus the PCA. In 1993, the reigning FIDE world champion Garry Kasparov decided to split from FIDE because he felt the organization was corrupt and formed a rival organization, the Professional Chess Association. In response, FIDE stripped Kasparov of his status and organized an event themselves to determine a new champion, which was Karpov against Timman. Kasparov claimed that, as he had not been defeated by a challenger to his title in a match, and in fact had defeated the rightful challenger, Nigel Short, in 1993, that he was still the reigning world champion. Thus, for the first time since the inaugural World Championship in 1886, there were two rival World Chess Championships. The PCA ran a World Championship cycle similar in format to that in use by FIDE at the time. It was to be the only full championship cycle run by the PCA. The PCA held a qualifying tournament and candidates matches in 1993 to 1995. A number of leading players did not participate, most notably the FIDE World Champion Anatoly Karpov. The events were held at a similar time as the FIDE World Chess Championship 1996, with many players competing in both cycles. The qualifying tournament in Groningen in December 1993, that's in the Netherlands, had 54 players participating in an 11-round Swiss system tournament, with the top 7 qualifying for the candidates tournament. The Intel World Championship quarterfinal matches were held at the Trump Tower in New York City. The matches were opened by, yes, by Donald Trump. And the website where I got this from stated that Trump was an American real estate and casino developer. Yes, he was, back then. I remember a quote from Trump when he was president that there were no US grandmasters in chess. Obviously, he did not do his homework there. These were the top 7 that qualified from that PCA Swiss tournament in Groningen in 1993. Michael Adams, Vishwanathan Anand, Gata Kamsky, Vladimir Kramnik, Sergei Tiviakov, Boris Gulko and Oleg Romanishin qualified for the candidates matches. They were joined by Nigel Short, the runner-up of the last cycle, and those 8 players played a series of candidate matches. In the first round, Kamsky overcame Kramnik, Short narrowly beat Gulko, Adams beat Tiviakov and Anand beat Romanishin. In the semi-finals, Kamsky beat Short and Anand beat Adams. Anand qualified to be the next challenger for world champion Kasparov by beating Gata Kamsky in the final. In this video we're going to look at a game from the semi-finals between Anand and Adams, the first game of that match. It is September 1994 and we are in Linares in Andalusia in the south of Spain. In those years Linares was the center of the chess world, with Don Luis Rentero organizing many magnificent events in his hotel Hotel Anibal. Kamsky against Short was the other semi-final played at the same time, and we are going to look at game 1 from the Anand-Adams match. The matches were scheduled over 10 games, but both finished prematurely. Let's see what happened in game 1. Anand is white and Adams is black. Anand opened with the e-pawn and knight f6, a rare opening choice at the top level, the Aljechin defense, named after the 4th world champion Alexander Aljechin, who introduced it in the 1921 Budapest tournament in games against Steiner and Semisch. 4 years later, the editors of the 4th edition of Modern Chess Openings wrote, "Nothing is more indicative of the iconoclastic conceptions of the hyper-modern school than the bizarre defense introduced by Aljechin. Although opposing to all tenets of the classical school, black allows his king's knight to be driven about the board in the early stages of the game, in the expectation of provoking a weakness in white's central pawns." In addition to Aljechin, another early exponent of the defense was Ernst Grunfeld, and a very famous opening is named after that chess player. Anand kicked that knight indeed with e5, knight d5, d4, d6, knight f3, and here bishop g4 is the main move according to theory, but Adams took on e5. Anand recaptured with the knight, g6, and here bishop c4 is the main move, but Anand played g3. Bishop g7, bishop g2, and both players castled. c6, rook e1, bishop f5 developing, and c3. Adams attacks the knight on e5 with knight d7, and look at this move, knight back to f3. Anand wants to keep pieces on the board. An internet poster called it a Karpovian type of retreat that appears passive. Rook e8, and we have a positional struggle where both players are maneuvering around, trying to find the best setup for their pieces. Anand develops. That knight wants to go through c4 to e5, knight 7 to f6, there goes that knight, queen c7, and the knight indeed lands on e5. Knight g4, there is a big battle going on for the e5 square. And Anand plays knight h4 here. Anand was famous for his play with the knights, and this is another example. Now we see a few trades. Knight takes e5, knight takes f5, g takes and d takes. Two pairs of minor pieces have been swapped, and white has a slight advantage. Is that pawn hanging there on e5? Not really, because if you take it, there is bishop takes d5, c takes, queen takes, and white is going to win the f-pawn. The bishop is hanging on e5. If you play the bishop away, that pawn is gone. White has an extra pawn in this position, so after d takes e5, it is better not to take that pawn on e5, and indeed Adams decided not to and played e6. Queen e2, protecting the e5 pawn, which was now hanging. Knight back to e7, f4, and now look at this move, knight back to d5, where it just came from. Anand decided to kick the knight back, and it went again to e7. Adams has played his knight up and down for the last 3 moves, which does not make a great impression. Black has a solid position and is saying to white, show me how you will break me down. Anand completes his development with bishop e3, rook ad8, and can you grab that pawn on a7? No, you can't, because after b6 that bishop is trapped and will be lost. Bishop takes a7 would be a blunder. Anand saw that, of course, and decided to play b4 instead, grabbing space on the queen side. Adams played rook d7, he's going to double up on that open d-file, and queen f2, and now bishop takes a7 is a threat. So Adams played knight c8 to protect a7, a4 grabbing even more space, rook ed8 as planned, and a5. Black has the d-file, but a dead bishop on g7 and a passive knight on c8. White has more space and 2 beautiful bishops. White is better here. Adams wants to activate that bishop, so he plays f6, e takes and bishop takes, and now that bishop has come to life. It's attacking the rook in the corner, so rook a b1 was played. The engine prefers rook a3 to keep the bishop out of the c3 square. But rook a b1 was played, and indeed Adams put that bishop on c3, attacking another rook. The rook stepped aside, and now rook d3. Nice play from Adams, who has now equalized the position. He's now threatening rook takes e3, followed by bishop d4. Let's show this on the board. Let's make a very silly move for white. Let's play h2, h3 for example. Doesn't make any sense, just to show the threat. Rook takes e3 is then very strong, because if you recapture, black wins the queen. So that is the threat after rook d3. Anand saw that and played the king away, king h1, to avoid that skewer happening. Bishop d4 anyway, and the bishops were swapped. And how to recapture? And as we'll see, Adams recaptures with the wrong rook. He should have recaptured with the rook from d8. Then the position is about equal. But he recaptured with the rook from d3, and that is a mistake. This move deserves a question mark. Here the engine shows that bishop d5 is possible straight away, but Anand prepares it with a devilish rook move. He played rook f2 e1 in this position. You can take on c4, then white takes on e6, and white is better. But in the game, Adams decided to play queen f7, and he missed the tactical shot that Anand now has. We're on move 31. Undoubtedly, both players were getting low on time. If you want to look for the tactical shot that Anand unleashes now, put the video on pause and let's see if you can find it. Anand played 32, bishop g2 to d5, exclamation mark. An interference move, taking away the protection of the rook on d4, which is now hanging. And yes, you can protect the rook with queen g7, but now we see the point of that rook f2 e1 move, because Anand played here rook e1 to e5, a second interference move, again taking away the protection of the rook. Wonderful 2 interference move right after the other. And this is the reason I picked this game for this video. Very nice. Anand is now also threatening bishop takes e6, followed by bishop takes f5. So it is time to give up the exchange. And Adams did so. Rook 4 takes d5. There really is nothing better. C takes d5, C takes d5, and you can take on e6 here. But Anand played a very nice move, g3, g4. Wonderful, because you cannot take that pawn. Again, if you want to put the video on pause and find out why black cannot take on g4. If you take with the pawn, there is rook g5 winning the queen. Okay, we won't take with the pawn then. Let's take with the queen instead. Then there is rook g1 also winning the queen. Very nice. So after g4 you cannot take that pawn. Adam saw that and played knight e7, brings the knight into the game. Anand took on e6. Now you can take on g4. And queen h4 attacking the knight. Powerful play from Anand. He has a winning position. Rook d7, rook b2 e1, bringing the last piece into the attack. The knight has to be protected again. King f8 from Adams and f4, f5, which was move 39, and it was the last move of the game because here Michael Adams resigned. White is threatening f5, f6, and if you take that pawn with knight takes f5, then there is rook f1, which is pinning the knight. You cannot interpose the rook because of, yes, queen d8, which is checkmate. So rook f7 is not possible. What about queen f7 to protect the knight? Well, then there is rook takes f5, queen takes f5, and rook f6 check. And again, we are winning the queen. Very nice tactics. A great game by Anand and a wonderful start of the match for him, striking straight away in game 1. Anand also won the second and third game. And after a draw in game 4, he struck again in game 5, being 4 points ahead after only 5 games played. Game 6 and 7 were drawn, which gave Anand the match victory by 5.5 points to 1.5. The remaining 3 games were not played. As mentioned, Anand went on to beat Gata Kamsky in the finals. In the other cycle, the FIDE World Championship, Kamsky had beaten Anand. But in the PCA World Championship, Anand beat Kamsky to qualify for the PCA World Championship match against Kasparov, which was played in 1995 in the World Trade Center in New York. I covered that match on my series on all World Championship matches. The link to that video is up here. And I hope you like this video and that you'll keep counting down towards the resumption of the Candidates Tournament with me on Chess to Impress. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. I've just started a chess trivia series on Twitter. Hope you will follow me there. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.